Hey, it's Wes from Poker for Pound Pups. We're at vlog number 10, which means we can start to answer some questions now that we've got a larger sample size. In today's video, we're going to compare 1, 2, and 3, 5, 10, and we'll answer some questions like, are players actually better at the higher stakes? Ow. Brody. Hey, Brody, I'm filming. Thank you. Are players really better at the higher stakes? Which game is more profitable? And how have I done on those few instances where I've gone back down to the lower stakes now that I've started playing 3, 5, 10 more regularly? We'll answer all those questions today and we'll check in on the channel's progress as well. But first, let's go over some of the recent interesting hands that we've played. And believe me, we've got some good, we've got some bad, and we've got some ugly. Let's dive right in. In the first notable hand, +1 limps for $10, and I raise 9-7 of clubs in the cutoff to $45 and get called by the button and the initial limper. So we go 3 ways to a flop to Queen 7-3 with 2 spades and a club. I've got middle pair and a backdoor flush draw, so when +1 checks, I'm really going to miss this board a lot, and multi-way, I've got some showdown value. I decide to just check, and the button checks it back. The turn is another queen, which is good because it means there are fewer queens out there for my opponents to have, but that doesn't stop +1 from leading for $60. He limp called, so I don't think he has a higher pair than my sevens. So unless he happens to have a queen, I think I'm probably ahead and he's probably just trying to steal this pot. I stick $60 in and the button folds. The river's the 10 of clubs and he bets 205. This sizing is pretty polarized. He's saying he's got a really strong hand. I actually prefer this to a smaller sizing because it's more likely that he's bluffing. Whereas if he put in a bet of around 100 to 125 or maybe 150, it would seem a lot more value heavy where he's just trying to get me to call. So I tank for a while, but ultimately I just find the call. He nods and mucks his cards. Great start to the session as we call on a couple streets with second pair. Towards the end of this session, I've got ace king. I'm pretty close to leaving and booking a win, but I've got ace king. I'm sitting in the hijack, and when it folds to me, I do a standard open to $35 and get called by the big blind, who's new to the table, but he's in his upper 20s, so I'm going to assume he's probably more on the aggressive side, and the fact that he just calls makes me think I've got the best hand, or maybe he has a super low pocket pair. Anyway, we go heads up in position to a flop of ace king 4. We just flop top 2. That's almost too good. But the news gets even better when my opponent donk leads for $45. Well, that's nice. We're in position and we want to keep all of his bluffs in play. So we just call inflow and we go to the turn, which is a 9. And now my opponent slows down and checks. Maybe he was just trying to full out all of my mid pocket pairs that would have hated the ace king on the flop. That's definitely possible. But anyways, after he checks, I bet about 2/3 pot. I make it 105, looking for some value from any of his single pair hands or maybe a weaker 2-pair hand. I'm hoping for a call, but it gets even better because he check raises me to 315. What on earth is going on here? Does he have ace 4, pocket 4s? I don't see him just flat calling me pre-flop with aces or kings, or even ace king pre-flop with the straddle still to act behind him. So that leaves him with ace 4 and king 4 suited. He could have pocket 4s, but again, I don't see him just donk leading with pocket 4s on an ace king board. So I don't know what's going on. He's donk led. Now he's check raised me on this turn to 315. I stick in the call. The river is a 3 and he checks again. I don't know what my opponent is doing. He's just flatted me pre-flop. Donk leads the flop. Check raises me on the turn and now checks the river. I am so lost. I don't know what he's doing. I tank for a while, but I want to get value if he has a lesser 2-pair. If he's got a set, then he's going to take my money. I bet 300 for value, and he doesn't take too long before calling and flipping over ace king. Chop it up. What mixed emotions. I'm glad not to be losing such a big pot, but I'm pretty disappointed that we somehow flop top two pair with ace king and don't profit any money. We end up booking the win on this night, however, netting a profit of $889. Let's move to the first meaningful hand of the second session. Session 2, and things have not been going as smoothly as the first one. We've been card dead for over an hour. We have to have a super nitty image. I've missed the few playable flops that we've had, and I'm just trying to get out of the hole. Under the gun +2, and we look down at red pocket tens. This'll do. I do my standard open to $35. The low jack sticks in the call, and it folds around to the straddle, who 3-bets to 125. This particular player is probably barely old enough to drink, and he's been on the more aggressive side. If he's structuring his ranges correctly, he's going to be 3-betting a lot of hands like ace 10, ace jack, ace queen, and even king queen that are more or less flipping with me. The standard play would be to just call, especially since I'm in position, but if I do that, then we're pricing in the low jack. And I don't love tens multi-way in the middle of two other players. I also think that based on my image, I've got a lot of fold equity, as I've been folding nonstop for an hour plus. So when I 4-bet, I can get the low jack to fold, and I'm probably going to fold out a lot of the hands that the straddle would be 3-betting with, like ace 10, ace jack, and ace queen. So I bank on my image coming through, and I stick in the 4-bet just like I would with aces, kings, and queens. I make it 320 to go. As expected, the low jack gets out of the way, and now it's back onto the straddle. He asks for a count, and I show that I have 520 left. It doesn't take him too long, and he announces he is all in. Ugh. My image is tight. I'm representing super strength with the 4-bet, and he doesn't hesitate to 5-bet jam on me, even though I've committed more than a third of my stack. At the absolute worst, he's got ace king, but more than likely, he's 5-betting with a higher overpair here. I instantly regret my 4-bet strategy, and ultimately I toss my tens into the muck. He flashes kings, letting me know that I made a good play, at least the fold part. Would have been nice to see a flop, bank a 10, and double up. Nevertheless, at least I don't burn all of my chips. We move on to the next hand. I'm telling you, the poker gods have a sense of humor, as after I get felted and reload, I once again get dealt pocket tens. I go ahead and raise, and once again, I get 3-bet, this time by a super nice guy named Mason. Shout out to you. He makes it 105. It folds around, and I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. I'm seeing a flop with this pair of tens. I call, even though I'm out of position, and we go to a flop of jack 7 deuce. This is not good for his range. He could have ace jack. He could have an overpair, but this flop is way better for me than for him. So when I check, he continues for 70, and I call. I intentionally make sure to call pretty quickly to let him know that I'm feeling sticky and prevent him from trying to fire off multiple rounds of bluffs. The turn is a brick. I check, and he checks it back. Now I know I'm ahead, as he's likely going to continue for value with all of his overpairs when I check this turn. The river is another jack, making it even less likely that he has ace jack, and now I'm almost positive that I have the winner. Instead of betting, trying to get value from an ace high hand, I check to try and induce him to attempt to steal this pot, which I plan on snap calling. But Mason wisely checks it back. I announce pocket tens. He says tens are good, and we finally take down a pot in this second session. A little bit later in this same second session, I'm trying to mount a comeback, and I open ace 5 of spades from the low jack to $35. We get calls from the big blind and the straddle and go 3 ways in position to a flop of 10-3 deuce with 2 spades. The big blind donk leads for 55. The straddle calls, and with the nut flush draw plus a gut shot, I'm not going anywhere. Out of position, I might check raise this flop, but in position, I'm going to just go ahead and realize my equity, and I stick in the call. A red king on the turn is not good for my hand, but all of a sudden the big blind shows weakness and checks, and the straddle follows suit. I could check back here and see a free river, but this card is so much better for my range, and it's really scary for someone who has only a 10. So I decide it's a great card to bluff on, especially when I can fire again on the river, whether I hit or not. I make it 205, and both players eventually fold. We end up making some of our losses back and cash out with a loss of 568 on this second session. Moving on to the third and final session that we include in this poker vlog, and this next hand was a bad omen for any of you Cowboys fans out there. A new player sits down at the table visiting the Bay Area from Texas into the Bay Area for the 49ers Cowboys game and sits just to my right in the straddle. This is literally his first hand. Anyway, I look down at Duckies and limp for $10. A few other players limp, and we go 4 ways to a flop of ace, ace, king. It checks to me, and I'm done with this hand. I just check, but it checks around, and the turn comes in, and we get a deuce from space. We're not done with this hand anymore. We've got a full house. One of the blinds bets for $40. Our new player at the table, the Cowboys fan, calls from the straddle, and I see no merit to just slow playing this. I bump it up to 150 as I really don't see an ace folding to this sizing. The initial better folds, and our Cowboys fan calls, and we go heads up to a river that is a queen. Cowboys fan checks it over to me. I don't think he has ace king or ace queen since he just limped pre-flop and he checked the river. So unless he happens to have an ace and the last deuce in the deck, this is my pot to lose. I bet 150 for value. He tanks for a little while and then decides he's going all in. That's music to my ears. It's a total of 350. I quickly call and he flips over ace 10. We scoop a nice pot of over $1,000. That was the start of a really bad trip to the Bay Area for this particular Cowboys fan. Really nice guy, but it just was not his weekend. Last hand that we have on film for this vlog, we have a player who's been folding nonstop for over an hour and a half. He puts in a dark bet of $20 from under the gun +1, and the low jack calls. I happen to look down at pocket kings on the button. Very happy to see somebody betting dark before they even get their cards, and even happier to see somebody putting in some more dead money with just a call. I've got the second best hand in poker, so I make it 80 bucks. Our dark bettor, who's been on the conservative side all night, sticks in a call and the low jack folds. So we're going heads up in position to a flop of 6-5 deuce with 2 hearts. We avoid the dreaded ace on the flop with kings, and our opponent checks over to us. I want to bet for value against all of his single pair holdings and for protection to fold out any of his ace high hands. So I make it $75, and he check raises me to $255. Okay, he's been folding a lot. He had a hand that wasn't good enough to raise, but was good enough to call. And then on a low board, he check raises me. This screams that he flopped the set. I think about this for a while. I know it's nitty, but I haven't seen him do anything aggressively all night. So why find a hero fold with pocket kings? Before I tell you what he had, I'll just mention that some people try and play game theory optimal or GTO, whereas I try and play an exploitative strategy. In other words, rather than playing in a formulaic way, I try and adjust how I play based off the tendencies of my opponents. In this particular instance, it failed, as I later learned that my opponent had an overpair and thought he had the best hand as he put me on overcards. So he got me off the better hand. I also think I might have been playing a little bit scared because I was up quite a bit and both of us had over $1,500 on the table, and I just wasn't prepared to lose it all with kings against a set. This is a flaw in my game, both in betting a board that doesn't favor me and in playing a little bit scared money when I've got a lot of chips on the table. So again, disappointing to fold out kings to a weaker hand. Nevertheless, we profit over $1,000 on the session, totaling over $1,300 between the 3 sessions combined. So let's recap. The reasons for doing the channel, number 1 is to get monetized so that we can make some money for shelter dogs. That's the whole purpose of this thing. We're not monetized yet, but we have had 2 people be very generous and make donations. As a reminder, each of my vlogs, I've got the link below to donate directly to the SPCA. I'm not taking any of that. So if you're so inclined and are feeling generous, donating is much appreciated, though not at all expected. Another reason for starting the vlog is to share the journey with you. We are at vlog 10. We've gone from having 16, 17 subscribers when we started making poker vlogs to now over 10 times that. So we're not monetized yet, but we are making progress. And remember, you don't have to donate. You don't need to do anything crazy. Just subscribing, liking, and commenting really helps the channel grow. It helps get more eyes on this. And when more people watch and more people comment, we get even closer to making money for Shelter Dogs. And finally, one of the goals of making this vlog is so that I can get better. Ideally, I want to get to the point where I can make poker my one and only day job. I'm not close to being that good yet, but am I getting better? Well, let's take a look at my 1-2-2 charts to show you how that was going. As a reminder, I was playing 1-2-2 before I started making these vlogs, and as you see on my 1-2-2 chart, a little rocky initially, and then a very clear upwards trajectory. And here is my 3-5-10 chart. Very rocky initially, then I battled back, I'm around even for a while, and then more recently I've taken off. Some of that might be me just adjusting to the game, some of that might be just some run good. Hopefully it's the former, but it could also be the latter. I want to be very clear that poker is a game where you can do everything right and still lose. So which game is more profitable? Well, as of the episodes covered in this video, vlog number 10, I was still slightly more ahead at 1-2-2 than I was at 3-5. However, that changes after vlog number 11. A little bit of a spoiler alert for you there. To be clear, the game is easier at 1-2-2. I'm still making way more blinds per hour at 1-2-2 than I'm at 3-5-10. Even though my win ratio isn't as high, I'm making almost as much money as of vlog number 10. And as you'll see in vlog number 11, I run pretty good and I go higher. In general, the game is tougher at 3-5-10. People have a much more balanced game, whereas at 1-2-2 or 1-3 or just regular 1-2, there's hardly any 3-betting. When people do show aggression, you can just back away. At 1-2, players are so much more focused on their hand rather than anything else, and it almost defeats the purpose to play balanced. You might as well just apply pressure. People are going to give you action initially, see if they hit on the flop, and if they don't, they're just going to let you run right over them. When they hit the flop, they're going to make it very clear. It makes it a very simple strategy to follow to be profitable at that level. I'm speaking generically. There are still some really good players at 1-2. I don't want to give the impression that all players at 1-2 are bad or simple or anything like that. That is not the case. There are plenty of good players, but in general, the players are better at the higher stakes at 3-5 and at 3-5-10. At 1-2-2, balance is really overrated and players are just focused on their hand. So different strategies work. They are very different games. It's still poker. It's still no limit poker. People are still going to raise pocket aces, but they are very different games. Last thing I wanted to mention, surprisingly, after starting playing 3-5-10, my 1-2-2 rate has flattened out quite a bit. Maybe that's because I'm playing with more balance, and so I'm not making as much money. I need to remember that and not raise 6-5 suited, instead just limp in, because people aren't going to take advantage or think that I'm capped when I limp in because they're just focused on themselves. Anyway, I don't want to preach. I'm not great yet, but I am getting better. The channel is gaining a following, so thank you for all of you who are subscribed, liking, commenting, sharing the videos with those who would enjoy it. If your experience at either 1-2-2 or 1-2 or 1-3 versus the mid-level stakes have been different, let me know in the comments. And if you have any questions about switching or taking a jump from one level to the next, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching Poker for Pound Pups. We'll see you in vlog 11. Hey everybody, subscribe here to catch the latest episodes. Also, hit that like button and share these videos with anyone who might enjoy them. Doing that really helps the channel and its goal to support dog shelters. So thanks for watching Poker for Pound Pups, and have a great day.